Welcome to the Deep Dive. Get ready to jump into the absolute whirlwind that is the football transfer window. Today, we are specifically zeroing in on the fast-approaching summer edition.
Yeah, and it's already promising to be, well, one of the busiest ever, according to our source material anyway. We're diving deep into a pretty comprehensive article from Sky Sports that lists a massive number of players who could be on the move.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our mission for this deep dive is really to cut through all the reported speculation, all the noise presented in this piece. We want to understand the potential moves listed, maybe analyze why the source suggests they might happen, and just get a real sense of what this summer window could actually look like. Especially, with that revamped Club World Cup, adding another layer of potential complexity. This is your shortcut, really, to quickly getting well informed on who's linked where in this article and what it all means according to the source.
Exactly. So, setting the scene a bit, the article notes the summer window has two main segments, an early opening from June 1st to June 10th. Then there's a pause before it reopens from June 16th right through until September 1st. And the expectation, as laid out in the piece, is that this will be one of the busiest summers ever, partly because of that new Club World Cup format.
Busiest ever. Wow. That prediction from the source definitely sets the stage. And the article doesn't waste any time, does it? Kicking off with what it flags as potentially the most contentious transfer of the summer. The source reports Trent Alexander-Arnold is potentially heading to Real Madrid.
Yeah, it's quite direct, actually. It says confirmation is imminent. It mentions the Liverpool fans' reaction and suggests there will be no U-turn from the player, which is, a very strong statement about likelihood coming straight from the source.
Imminent confirmation for a Liverpool vice-captain. Yeah, that's certainly a headline grabber right at the top of the piece. Another player the article points to as an early mover is Matthias Cunha from Wolves, reportedly set for Manchester United.
Right. The source claims he's all set to move to Old Trafford, with United reportedly poised to trigger his $62.5 million release clause. And here's where it gets really interesting, according to the source. The detail that the absence of any sort of European football for United doesn't appear to be a barrier to the move.
That particular detail from the source feels pretty significant. It sort of pushes back against the conventional wisdom that top players must have Champions League football, right? Meanwhile, across the country, Liverpool are reportedly looking at Florian Wirtz from Bayer Leverkusen.
Yeah, this would be a huge statement signing if it happens, based on what the source says. The report claims Wirtz is now open to leaving Germany after previously turning down Bayern Munich. Liverpool's interest is clear in the source, but the article adds a note of caution that despite being open to leaving Leverkusen, he could still decide to stay. So definite reported interest, yeah, but not a done deal by any means.
So we've got some massive potential moves highlighted right at the top of this source material. Let's maybe zoom in on some of the clubs the article suggests will be particularly active. Manchester United is certainly highlighted, with the piece framing their situation as a looming rebuild and listing a really striking volume of players linked with either leaving or arriving.
It's quite a list, yeah. Looking at potential exits first, the source names several key players. Alejandro Garnacho is described as widely expected to be a casualty, or cash-in. The source links this to his benching in the Europa League final and absence from the final day squad, suggesting perhaps a potential disconnect or maybe a strategic move by the club to capitalize on his value. Antony's loan success is seen as making a permanent exit more likely, according to the source, so they can raise a decent fee, though it points out it won't be anywhere near the $85 million they originally spent. Christian Eriksen is an obvious departure, expected to leave on a free as his contract is up.
Right. And Bruno Fernandes is also put under the spotlight by the source. The article says he put his future back in the spotlight after the Europa League final. It even acknowledges the club could cash in on him, despite the manager reportedly rejecting the prospect of his captain leaving. Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia are specifically linked by the source there.
And the article touches on Kobbie Mainoo, described as a rare glimmer. But worryingly, there are fears he could move due to the perilous state of United's finances and the peculiarities of PSR profitability and sustainability rules. His lack of game time in the final week reportedly heightened those fears. The source links PSR explicitly to the possibility of needing to sell a high-value asset like Mainoo, to balance the books. Andre Onana is also under scrutiny in the source after a catalog of high-profile errors, with the Saudi Pro League seen as their best chance of moving him on. But the source questions if the funds would even be available to sign a replacement keeper. It really paints a picture of a club wrestling with performance issues and these financial pressures.
It certainly does. On the flip side, the source links a whole host of players potentially arriving at Old Trafford. Victor Gyökeres is mentioned, reportedly available for around £55 million after scoring, 53 goals?
Hmm.
Arsenal also interested, it says. The report notes United's chance of signing him took a hit with the Europa final loss. That's an interesting piece of forecasting from the source.
Liam Delap is another striker linked, available for maybe £30 million following Ipswich's relegation. The article states United are in pole position, but Chelsea and Newcastle are also keen. And crucially, they can offer Champions League football, which the source flags as a potential lure for the player, so competition there. Jean-Philippe Mateta from Crystal Palace is linked after his 17 goals. Ryan Cherki from Lyon is reported to be available for £20 million, which the source calls a snip for a player with 12 goals and 20 assists. Both Manchester clubs linked, it says.
And some younger targets too, right? Franco Mastantuono, a River Plate teenager, is linked with United and Chelsea. The source says a move would likely wait until late 2025, but a deal could be agreed this summer for his $38 million release clause. Antoine Semenyo from Bournemouth is another forward linked, with United reportedly the current frontrunners, but another half a dozen clubs also interested. Though the article questions the reported $70 million price tag, that's a clear pointed debate raised by the source itself. Finally, Ederson, the Atalanta defensive midfielder, is also reportedly a target for United, according to reports cited in the article.
Okay, so looking at all these names linked with United in this source, what stands out is, like you said, the sheer scale of potential change. It's framed by the article as a deep-seated rebuild. It seems driven by the reported need to improve the squad and navigate financial constraints like PSR, as mentioned explicitly regarding Man U. This raises an important question, doesn't it? How significant is the lack of European football as a barrier, or not a barrier, for these reported targets?
It's a fascinating debate point right within the source. The article states lack of European football isn't a barrier for Kuna, citing his imminent move. But it is mentioned as a preference for players like Rashford and a draw for clubs like Chelsea or Newcastle pursuing Delap, or targets like Sesko, who apparently wants to play for a club that can compete for the Champions League. How do we reconcile that based on what the source tells us?
Well, it suggests the impact isn't universal, maybe. For a player like Kuna with a release clause, perhaps the personal terms in the project at United are compelling enough regardless. For others, like potential exits or players considering multiple clubs, the CL draw remains a factor, according to the source. And the valuations mentioned $62.5 million for Cunha, $30 million for recently relegated Dilep, $55 million for Gyökeres, that reported $70 million for Semenyo that the source questions. These figures really highlight the market dynamics the source is reporting, where the demand for specific positions, particularly strikers, appears to be driving up prices significantly, regardless of perceived status or European qualification.
Absolutely. That striker market seems key. Let's shift focus to Liverpool. They're also expected to be busy, especially with a new manager in Arne Slot taking charge. The article mentions potential arrivals, including Florian Wirtz, who we've already discussed as a major target.
Right. Jeremy Frimpong from Bayer Leverkusen is another name the source highlights, saying Liverpool are on the verge of completing a deal, with the player reportedly completing a medical last week already. The analysis around this one, according to the source, is already on where he'll play, whether as a right back or further forward, indicating the tactical questions around his potential role. Diogo Costa, the Porto goalkeeper, is also mentioned, of Man City apparently interested, but he's seen by the source as one of the best in his position in Europe, implying he would be a significant arrival.
Okay. On the potential exit side for Liverpool, Trent Alexander-Arnold is obviously the big one, as the source reports his departure is imminent.
Yeah.
Luis Diaz is also listed, with ongoing talks over a new contract mentioned, and Barcelona having a long-standing interest reported. Darwin Núñez is described by the source as increasingly peripheral, with a Jamie Carragher's pundit comment from December cited where he reportedly said, "I'm not sure he's here next year." And Kaimin Kelleher, the goalkeeper, is mentioned. The potential arrival of Georgi Marmadashvili, who's mentioned elsewhere in the article as a Liverpool target, and the feeling, according to the source, that Kelleher is just too good to sit on the bench, suggests a move is likely. Harvey Elliott is also listed, with his reported lack of game time under Arne Slot, having apparently alerted Premier League and Bundesliga clubs to his availability. So analyzing these potential Liverpool movements through the source's lens, the managerial change clearly seems to be influencing the transfer strategy. We're seeing reported interest across various positions, attacking midfield with Wirtz, fullback with Frimpong, keeper with Costa potentially coming in and Kelleher maybe going out, and then the forwards like Diaz, Núñez, Elliott. Forecasting based just on the source material, Kelleher and Elliott seem like strong candidates for moves, mainly due to the reported game time issues. The Trent situation is portrayed as highly likely. Imminent is a strong word. Diaz's future seems tied to contract talks, while Nunez's situation is framed more tentatively, citing a pundit's forecast rather than a definitive club decision yet.
Okay, let's move over to Chelsea. Another club the article suggests is looking at a massive amount of movement, including many players returning from loans. The sheer reported volume here also points to a pretty significant refresh, doesn't it?
It really does. Potential arrivals mentioned include Jonathan David from Lille, expected to be a free agent with Chelsea and West Ham. Among clubs interested, that seems like a low-risk profile, the source is highlighting. Mark Gahey, the Palace defender, is listed, with his boyhood club Chelsea keen back in January, and the Champions League lure potentially helping now. Although the source notes Newcastle and Spurs have already bid, adding a layer of competition reported by the source. Jared Branthwaite is mentioned as being on Chelsea's list alongside Man Ut and Man City. Tyler Dibling, the Southampton young talent, is in high demand, with a $55 million valuation cited by the source, monitored by Aston Villa, Chelsea, Spurs, and Leipzig, really highlighting the competition for young domestic talent. Hugo Ekitike, the Frankfurt striker, is attracting interest from Chelsea and Liverpool, among others.
And on the potential exit side, Christopher Nkunku has failed to establish himself, making a move likely, as he's reportedly frustrated with his limited role. So the source is linking performance and player frustration directly to a potential exit. Victor Osimhen remains a long-term target, but is expensive, with Saudi Arabia seen by the source as his likeliest next destination, a forecast based largely on cost, it seems. Jadon Sancho's Chelsea loan situation is discussed. The source presents different possibilities. Chelsea could pay £5 million to send him back to United, but the source also understands he wants to stay. And his starting the final game is seen by some insiders as an indication that he stays, so the source is reporting conflicting perspectives or interpretations of events there. Benjamin Sesko, the RB Leipzig striker, is listed with Chelsea interest, though the source reiterates he wants to play for a club that can compete for the Champions League and domestic title, linking player ambition to target feasibility again.
Raheem Sterling is included in the list, with the source describing him as a loan flop, although he wasn't actually on loan, so maybe the source is just highlighting his lack of impact since arriving. The question of where next is posed. Keba Arrizabalaga is heading back to Chelsea after his loan with no buy option. Axel Disasi and Ben Chilwell are also returning loanees with minimal impact at their loan clubs. Finally, Morgan Rogers from Aston Villa is a surprise Chelsea link. But the source crucially suggests Villa would only sell him if it was an absolute necessity to stay in line with financial rules. End quote. This implicitly links Chelsea's potential interest to Villa's reported financial constraints, suggesting Chelsea might look to capitalize if clubs are forced to sell due to FFP or PSR.
Yeah. Analyzing Chelsea through this article, the sheer volume of reported ins and outs, particularly the loanees returning, it points to a significant squad overhaul. The source suggests this is driven partly by performance issues in Nkunku, Sterling, the failed loanees, and potentially by navigating financial rules, as hinted at with the Morgan Rogers detail. Which reported targets seem the most realistic based on the source's descriptions? Well, Jonathan David as a free agent fits the profile of a pragmatic move. Maybe. The young talents like Dibling could be long-term projects. The striker links Ekitike, Sesko, Osimhen reflect a clear reported need, but they vary significantly in cost and feasibility according to the source's analysis, like Osimhen being expensive, Sesko's CL requirement.
Makes sense. Let's turn to Arsenal now. The article also lists quite a bit of reported activity for them, suggesting they're looking to build on their recent strong seasons.
Definitely. Martin Zubimendi from Real Sociedad is widely expected to become Arsenal's first signing, with the source noting he U-turned on a move to Liverpool last summer, but now seems set for the Premier League. The source presents this as a highly likely outcome. Victor Gyökeres is mentioned again here, with Arsenal listed among the many clubs interested in the prolific sporting striker. Mark Guehi is also listed. While Chelsea are keen, the source highlights that bids have come from Newcastle and Spurs, implying Arsenal might need to move quickly or look elsewhere if their interest remains. That's a point of competitive tension from the source.
Thomas Partey's situation is mentioned, with talks over a new contract reportedly underway as his current deal is up soon. That's a key detail impacting their midfield planning. Aaron Ramsdale is listed as a post-relegation transfer surely looms, following Southampton's return to the Championship, making him a prime candidate for a move back to the Premier League, according to the source's forecast. Benjamin Sesko, the RB Leipzig striker, is listed with Arsenal interest again, reiterating his desire for a CL title contending club, a factor that shapes his potential destinations according to the source.
Kieran Tierney is expected by the source to rejoin Celtic after falling down the pecking order. Nico Williams from Athletic Club is a fascinating one. A player Arsenal have reportedly been keen on since last summer, but Spanish reports cited in the article claim he's now a target for Real Madrid. The Athletic manager is also quoted, stating he assumes their star player will stay. However, the article crucially highlights his reported £48 million release clause as a potential way to seal a deal despite the club's or manager's hopes. This is a great example of the source presenting conflicting factors and suggesting how they might be resolved, via the clause.
Yeah, that release clause is key. Oleksandr Zinchenko is another expected departure, having fallen out of favor, according to the source, partly due to the emergence of Miles Lewis-Skelly linking internal squad dynamics to potential exits. Juan Garcia, the Espanyol keeper, was explored as a potential understudy for Raya in the past, and another impressive season makes it likely his name will resurface, the source linking performance to renewed interest. Finally, Rodrigo, the Real Madrid forward, have had links to the Premier League emerge, with Arsenal and Man City touted as potential landing spots. Described by the source as often overlooked due to Mbappe and Vinicius Jr.,
So based on this source, it looks like Arsenal are prioritizing midfield Zubimendi, the Partey contract situation, attack Gyökeres, Sesko, Williams, Rodrigo, and potentially defense and keeper depth with Guehi, Ramsdale, Garcia. Alongside the reported exits like Tierney and Zinchenko. Forecasting likely exits based only on these reports, Tierney and Zinchenko seem the most certain given the descriptions. The Nico Williams situation, as you highlighted, is incredibly nuanced as presented by the source the reported interest from multiple huge clubs, the manager's public stance expecting him to stay, and the existence of that clear release clause create a real point of tension. It tells us, according to this report, that despite the club's hopes, the player and interested clubs might hold the key via that clause.
Right. Beyond these big clubs, the article lists many other notable player situations and club dynamics. Let's maybe try to group these by the driving forces the source seems to highlight, rather than just list them all one by one.
Good idea. We could look at players reportedly affected by contracts or loan outcomes first. Cristiano Ronaldo is mentioned, with a link from the FIFA president regarding the Club World Cup and the need to switch clubs because Al Nassr aren't in it, a CWC-driven potential move, according to the source. Kevin De Bruyne is reported to have been caught by surprise that his contract wouldn't be renewed at Man City, with Napoli appearing the most likely destination, linking a contract decision directly to a future club. Marco Asensio's potential $12.5 million permanent option for Villa after his PSG loan is noted, alongside the fact he tailed off at the end but had a healthy return, and his days at PSG appear numbered, illustrating a loan outcome with mixed performance leading to a likely permanent move elsewhere. Callum Wilson's contract is up at Newcastle, with the manager uncertain, and an incentive-based deal suggested if he stays showing those contract negotiation dynamics. Jamie Vardy is leaving Leicester after 13 years, but believes he is still capable of playing in the Premier League, a free agent seeking a new challenge. And James McAtee at Man City is open to leaving in the final year of his deal, with Forest, Leverkusen, and Dortmund keen another player reaching a contract juncture looking for opportunity.
Interesting how contract situations are such a clear driver for so many. What about players reportedly facing game time or performance issues? Jack Grealish is said to have plummeted into obscurity at City, with a lack of game time even leading to him not making the final day's squad, clearly highlighting reduced minutes as a reason for speculation. Darwin Núñez, as we mentioned, is described as increasingly peripheral, with that pundit's comment cited. And Ebereki Eze at Crystal Palace is kind of the flip side. Securing Europa League qualification is seen as a strong pitch to stay, but after his best season, the source forecasts more interest will surely be there, with Man City tracking him. Shows how good performance in European qualification can still lead to external interest.
Right. Next, maybe players linked to specific incidents or club situations. Emi Martinez's teary-eyed reaction in Villa's final home game is seen by the source as seemingly signaling his departure, linking emotion directly to transfer speculation, with Barcelona, Saudi Arabia, and Man Utlit linked. João Pedro at Brighton's training ground altercation and subsequent absence is linked by the source to future speculation, showing how disciplinary issues can fuel rumors. Joby Bellingham has noise about a potential move to the Bundesliga, with talks reportedly with Frankfurt and Dortmund Leipzig also interested and a decision expected soon. The source links this partly to Sunderland's promotion status, a club situation influencing a player's decision, perhaps. Murillo at Nottingham Forest is in a strong position with a deal until 2029, likely commanding a big fee linked with Liverpool and Chelsea, and hoping to be part of Forest's European adventure, even if they haven't qualified yet in this timeline linking player aspirations to reported club goals.
Gotcha. Then we have players with big clauses, high valuations, or where the club is in a strong position, according to the source. Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle is helped by his CL qualification. The source cites a Brazilian report of an Al Ittihad 100 million release clause, highlighting the impact of huge clauses, especially from the Saudi League. Bart Verbruggen, Brighton's keeper, is linked with Bayern and Real Madrid, but Brighton are in a strong position with 3 years left, suggesting, according to the source, it would take a big offer. And yeah, Murillo, as you mentioned, has that long deal until 2029, putting Forest in a strong position for a big fee. And Tyler Dibbling has that eye-catching $55 million valuation from Southampton for a young talent.
And finally, let's group some of the general striker demand-supply cases that pop up in the source. Rodrigo Muniz at Fulham had West Ham interest back in January, but finished the season strongly, suggesting more suitors due to the widely reported striker shortage. Dusan Vlahovic is described as a transfer window regular, linked due to striker demand versus supply, highlighting this general market trend as a driver for his consistent links. Beto at Everton is being considered by Leeds after their promotion, a newly promoted club seeking a top-flight striker.
Okay, so beyond the big club deep dives, this article gives us a real mosaic of other potential moves, each with unique drivers according to the source. Analyzing these individual cases, it's clear specific circumstances detailed in the source are driving these potential moves. Contracts expiring, loan outcomes, performance or game time issues, reported financial pressures, club situations like promotion status or European hopes, player preference, specific incidents like the Villa tears or the Pedro altercation, and those reported valuations and relief clauses we discussed earlier. These valuations, especially for players who aren't necessarily global superstars or are at clubs outside the traditional top six, really underscore the market dynamics reported in this piece, don't they?
Absolutely. Pulling it all together, this Sky Sports article reinforces some clear overall market dynamics. The impact of financial regulations like PSR, explicitly mentioned for Man Ud and implicitly influencing others like Chelsea and Villa, is a significant constraint and potential driver of sales.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is the widely reported shortage of strikers throughout the source. That seems to be driving up demand and prices significantly, as seen in the various valuations mentioned and the sheer number of clubs linked to forwards across the board. The lure of Champions League football remains a key factor for many players and clubs, helping attract talent and keep existing stars, according to the article's analysis of situations like Guimaraes, Romero, and Eze.
And the role of free agents like Jonathan David, Christian Eriksen, and potentially Jamie Vardy and Callum Wilson is also notable. They offer a way for clubs, perhaps those constrained financially, to add experience and quality without huge transfer fees. And of course, the influence of leagues like the Saudi Pro League continues to be a factor linked to players like Ronaldo, Onana, Osimhen, Emi Martinez, and Mitoma, and reportedly willing to pay significant fees or trigger large clauses like that, reported $100 million for Guimaraes.
This raises an important question, doesn't it, based on everything this source has presented. How do all these interlocking factors, financial rules, position shortages, European competition, free agents, global leagues, and that looming Club World Cup, how do they interact to create the market we're reportedly seeing shaping up this summer? It's a complex interplay, where a PSR constraint at one club might lead to a sale that benefits another, or a release clause bypasses negotiation entirely.
It's certainly a picture of a dynamic and sometimes unpredictable market, according to this article.
And hopefully this deep dive, based on the details and analysis from the Sky Sports article, has given you a clearer view of who the major potential players are this summer and what factors are reportedly at play behind the scenes. We've covered potential rebuilds at big clubs, the influence of contract situations and performance, the pressures of financial rules, and the perpetual quest for European football as driving forces behind potential movement.
The volume of players potentially on the move, according to the source, is quite staggering, really.
Considering that volume and the various pressures on clubs' financial rules, European qualification success or failure, player desires, and that looming Club World Cup, will this summer window, as reported in this article, fundamentally shift the landscape of club football more dramatically than any before? Or is this just another cycle of the market dynamics we've discussed, perhaps amplified? What stands out to you from these potential moves and the reasons the source gives for them?